Today's guest is Trevor Gnesin, CEO of Logomark. Trevor built Logomark from the ground up into one of the largest and most recognized suppliers in the promotional products industry. Logomark serves thousands of distributors across North America with a wide range of innovative products. In this episode, Trevor shares his journey as a founder, the lessons learned from decades of building Logomark, and his perspective on what it takes to stay relevant and competitive in a fast-changing market. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you will too. We spoke for almost an hour, and he's just such a great guy. So smart, so funny, so thoughtful. I really think you're gonna enjoy this one. Let's get into it. Trevor, great to see you again.
Great to see you, man. Thanks for having me on.
No, this is unbelievable. And obviously for the audience, I only recently met Trevor. We met each other at the ASI Counselor Awards, and for me, that was my first time going to one of those, and it was definitely interesting. I liked it. It was nice to see some familiar faces. Do you go every year to that show?
Most years. I used to always go, just unless I'm going overseas or something like that, because, it's summertime. But I used to go. I like the show. It's a great show.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun. So I just want to kind of learn about your story. I know you grew up in South Africa, and obviously your accent gives that away, but I know you started Logomark in California. How did you get from South Africa to California, and what made you move, and what made you start Logomark?
So if I go back in time, I started in this industry in 1980. I was actually a wearables manufacturer in South Africa. I was in the promo space. I was probably one of the largest in Africa at the time. We used to do not only corporate gear, but we did corporate uniforms as well. We used to do most of the uniforms from some of the big supermarkets and those like Kentucky and all those type of stores. And then we went into the hard goods business later. And then in 1992, I decided, with apartheid coming to an end, that it would be time to come to America and utilize my production facility to export to America, because pricing would have been very competitive at the time, and we were geared up to do custom orders within 10 days, fully customized wearables and stuff like this. We could turn around 50 padded jackets in 10 days, fully customized panels, all different panels, whatever the case was. And at the time, you couldn't get that in the USA. And so I came across the USA with my family in 1993 and launched firstly as a distributor, but nobody understood my accent. It was nobody understood me, and they'd shake their head, yes, but they didn't know what the hell I was saying. And eventually, being a supplier in South Africa, I decided, maybe it's best to switch over to a supplier. And we started selling some wearables, but it was very, very difficult because, officially apartheid only ended in 1994 when Mandela became president, and that was a transition. So people weren't quite ready to buy South African merchandise at that point in time. And so I decided to go back into the hard goods side and started selling hard goods, because to manufacture wearables in the USA was pretty tough at the time and a big investment. And, when I left South Africa, you couldn't take much money out of South Africa. We were allowed to leave the country with $5,000. And that was the allowance you could take out the country. And so that made it very, very difficult to start a wearables business. So, I launched, we were in the gift business as well, hard goods business in South Africa as well. And we launched, starting with writing instruments. That was the easiest way to get in to the promo industry and as a supplier. And, that's how we got going. And very soon we became one of the top suppliers for the writing instruments in the USA.
Well, take me back to that. First of all, where were you sourcing these products from? Like, how did you even know about um, writing instruments or pens? Like, where do you learn about that? You're coming from the wearables market in South Africa. You're now in the U.S. You realize it's too hard to do wearables in the U.S. You start to pivot back to maybe hard goods. Take me into your mind. I know it's 30 years ago when this was happening. 32 years ago. What was your mindset like, and how did you find those suppliers to be like, these are the right partners for us?
Um, in those days, China was very, very, you couldn't even go to China. 30 years ago, it was very difficult to even go to China. Um, all the trading in China was done through the Hong Kong companies or Taiwanese companies. And um, at that time, the high-end pens or metal pens, most brass pens, were being sold and manufactured in Taiwan. This was before Taiwan became a the largest semiconductor manufacturers in the world. At that point in time, they were still had factories going on in China and in Taiwan. And so all the metal pens, most of them came from Taiwan. There were metal pens obviously being made in China, but they were really bad quality, whatever the case at that point in time. Plastic pens were being made in China and being bought through Hong Kong or Taiwan at the time. And in 1997, it became a lot easier to go through to China, and I went to China in 1997. I mean, when I went there in 1997 I went earlier, but in 1997, China was still, it was a different world, man. People were still riding bicycles. The only cars that were there were either taxis or government official cars. There were no highways, there were no freeways, there was nothing. Yeah, if you went to the Pen City, as they called it in those days, it was an 8-hour drive through roads that you wouldn't go on in this country. You know what I mean? They were just bad. And so, you know, fortunately, I knew a lot of Chinese that I'd met over the years. And uh, because of my connections in Taiwan, that's how we broke into the pen business. And we became like the kings in the metal pen business, not in the plastic pen business, but in the metal pen business. We were really on our game, and we built up. If I go back in time, you know, uh, if you take inflation into account, probably we'd built up just in metal pens in those days, probably doing $60-70 million in metal
Wow.
pens in proportion to that time. You know what I mean? If you look at the value of the product today versus that time. And so that's what our specialty was. And then we started branching out into all the different products. And, you know, whatever money we made, we put into the different products. And um, we had, in business, you have to have, I don't care how smart you are, and, how educated you are. It means nothing. At the end of the day, you need a bit of luck. I've seen some very smart guys. I've seen some very wealthy guys and come to this country with a rich man and end up a poor man. It's just they didn't have luck go their way. I was very, very fortunate that I got lucky twice. Really, when I say lucky twice, I mean big time lucky. I came up with a pen that just took off, and we sold literally millions of these pens. And that kind of gave us the cash that we needed to expand. And, when I got to this country and decided to switch from a distributor to a supplier, um, which was really my game, um, I traveled this country. I used to leave on a Sunday night and come back home on a Thursday. And I did this for a long time, meeting distributors all over the country and got to know a lot of people. And I always said to them, if you need anything, I can find any product that you want. And then my second lucky break came in probably around about 1998. 19, no, I started traveling like this in 1994, but in 1997, one of my distributors called me up and he said to me, I have a product that's just taken off. It's got onto CNN. Um, I can't get it. They can't make it fast enough in the States. They're too expensive, and we need to move fast. I said to him, what is the product? He said to me, it's a bracelet. I said, what do you mean a bracelet? He says, it's a bracelet with the words WWJD. I said, what does that mean? And he said, what would Jesus do? He was in the Bible Belt. And I said, send me a sample. And he FedExed me a sample overnight. I said, I contacted my factory in Taiwan. I said, what is this? Can you get this? In those days, everything was done by fax machines. You didn't even have internet in those days. It's all done by fax. And my guy said to me, I've got a factory that we can go to in Taiwan and we can get them made for you quickly. I said to my client, I said, send me an order. I'll fly to China tonight and I'll bring the products in. So he gave me an order. I think if I remember correctly, it was about 400,000 pieces. They were cheap. I mean, the product, he was selling the product at 75 cents. I had to buy them at a price to sell to him. He was selling them to one of the Christian bookstores. They were selling, I think, at that time at $1.99. And I, 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 he said to me, I'm faxing your order now. Go for it. And I called my wife up, and she wasn't even home. And I said to her, I'm going to China tonight. I bought a ticket to Taiwan, and she wasn't home. So I left a message. gone to gone to gone to Taiwan. And I went straight to the airport, got on a plane, landed there, went straight to the factory, and found the product. And they made a sample for me. And within 3 or 4 days, I had a sample, got it to him, and we showed it to the bookstore. And all of a sudden, these things just took off. And I had
Wow.
them delivered by FedEx within 2 weeks.
Wow.
We ended up selling millions of these things. I mean, I'll tell you now, I think he probably made about $5 or $7 million
Wow.
profit on this product. I made a lot of money. It was one of those things like the rock, the pet rock type of thing. It was one of those things, and in 8 weeks we made a lot of money. Both he did, the customer did, everybody made money. And I said to him, "Get out. This thing's going to get copied, and if you continue, you're going to get burnt." And he had a partner. It was kind of sad. His partner stayed in. His partner was the main money guy. And he was just saw this cash coming in, and he took his money. He was the sales guy, and he took his money and he got out. And I said to his partner, "Get out now. You'll get stuck." And he doubled down. And I said, "Big mistake." I got out, and he got out, and the guy who stayed in lost everything. It was very sad. He
Entrepreneurship
lost
is
his
all about
business.
timing. It's all about like timing and realizing the signs and just feeling your gut instinct and being like, this is just not right. By the way, I was going to commend you because this is very different than the typical supplier journey in the promo space. But it's interesting because it seems like you saw an opportunity, had nothing to do with the promo, but your relationships that you built over the years, and you said, I think this could also be a great client of mine, even though it doesn't maybe fit all the different benchmarks of what my typical clients look like. And you took that opportunity, and it paid off huge for you.
You know that. That's what Logomark is about. Logomark is a company that is a very innovative company. We've innovated a lot of things in this industry. I mean, we were the first company to come out with, you know, fast deliveries. We launched um, overnight deliveries, but we launched on the same basis as what UPS did. It had a red, blue, orange, and regular service. You could get it in 7 days, 3 days, and 2 days, and one day. But we charged for that service, and we were the first company to launch that. And at that point in time, this was in 1998. By the way, that money that we made on those bracelets, I took that money and plowed it right back into the business and came out with a whole new array of products. And that's what really launched Logomark. And, Logomark is a company that was very innovative at its time. We worked on two things: product quality. It was essential in Logomark. And to this day, people buy from Logomark because when they buy from Logomark, they can sleep at night knowing that the quality of the product is probably one of the best in the industry. And also, in terms of safety and whatever, we do a lot of testing on our stuff and compliancy. The other thing was service. I come from a very service-orientated industry in South Africa. It was service, service, service. Price, people will pay a higher price if they know they got quality and service. Okay, and that's what Logomark was based on. And that's the principles that we grew the business on. And so from there, we just expanded on that same concept. And we were the first company, in those days, you were either a specialist, you were either a pen specialist or you're a bag specialist. And in the case of, what was the company called in those days? They went and bought up a whole lot of companies, but they kept them all separately. They were all separate companies. It eventually became Kuzi, what it is Kuzi today, but they were all separate companies. You know what I mean? We made it all a one-stop shop, and we launched a first catalog with, you name it, we've got it. And that was the change. And our thing was, catalogs used to be very basic. Catalogs were, here's the product, here's the price, there it is. We changed it to a retail-looking catalog. So when you presented it, the products looked the quality that you'd go find in a Nordstrom's or something like this, so that type of quality. And so we became very different in the industry. We weren't trying to be the biggest. That was never the goal of Logomark, but we wanted to be one of the most respected companies in the industry. And I think that's still the perception of Logomark today. We're a very respected company. For the most part, we deliver our products on time. Listen, there's always something that happens, but I can tell you now, we have probably the lowest error rate in the industry in terms of getting product out. And we probably have some of the most compliant product in the industry. And that's what we built up. That's what Logomark's been. That's the foundation of Logomark.
That's amazing. So Logomark, and obviously it probably came originally from those premium pens. Because when I think of like a plastic pen, maybe, I mean, they're fine, but they're throwaway in many ways. And then you start thinking of like the metal pens. You start getting a clientele that's a little bit more premium, that wants to make an impact. And then that kind of expanded to the rest of your catalog, more premium, elevated products that feel more retail, feel like something people actually want to keep.
Absolutely. Metal pens were around, but low-cost metal pens. We went and we came up with our brand called Batoni, and it was the first real quality brand out there. I mean, they were great designs, and it took off. Pen business became a big business for us, and we stayed away from plastic pens for a long, long time. We only got into plastic pen business, plastic pens, probably 5, 6, 7 years later. To us, we were always about the high-end product and quality type of products. Obviously markets change, and the one thing that we've been very good at, and like I told you the story about the bracelets, we can adapt very, very quickly. That's what that's what Logomark is about. Logomark is a type of company that if the market is down, we have to find products that are less expensive. We can really turn on a dime. We're one of the few companies that have our own facility in China, not production facility, but our own staff, our own management. At one time, we had 50 people in China, you know, managing our product, checking our product. I can tell you now, there's not one container that leaves China that is not, the products haven't been inspected. We inspect, and most people probably inspect for certification or whatever. You only have to do it on a 6 monthly basis. We kind of got into a stage where every shipment is checked. It just avoids the headaches down the line. Listen, is some product ever going to get through? Of course. You know what I mean? It's impossible to stop everything. But if we can stop 99% of it, you know what I mean? That's what we're about. And I can tell you now, we're not the most loved in China. We love for how much business we give them. But they know if they deliver bad quality product, we'll stop the shipment. We reject containers all the time.
By the way, as a distributor, that to me, well, I used to be a distributor, but that was the most important thing to me. Like that kept me up at night, frankly, as a distributor, because there's so much work that goes into getting the order from beginning to end. You have to advertise the right person. You have to find the customer at the right time. They have to come in. You have to give them an amazing customer service, get them over the finish line. There's all these hands that are being touched and all these processes being touched. And then you get over to the supplier. And I imagine for you guys, it's even tenfold how many people touch every single order. And if one little thing goes wrong and the product gets delivered the day after the event, all the work everyone did was for nothing.
Absolutely.
Nothing. And it's demoralizing, frankly, for the team because, it happens. And, it happens all the time. And every single day, there's a different thing that goes wrong. And I just want to kind of understand from your perspective, with so much ups and downs of orders going right, orders going wrong, how did you kind of keep yourself sane? You've been doing this for over 30 years. I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of challenges and things going perfect and then things breaking. And you said you have a great track record, but even that 1% to 2% that does go wrong, which is understandable, could make you feel a little bit like demoralized. How do you keep yourself motivated even during this period?
So at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, it's about money, and mistakes cost money. So when you work out that errors, you run 3 to 5% in errors in a company, and you add up on the sales volume that you do, you're talking about a lot of money. Rather invest that money into your staff and train them to understand and have that culture of being proud of what they do. I'd walk through the factory and I'd see a product lying on the floor and I'd pick it up and I'd say, if you don't respect your product, then you don't respect your job. I don't care what the product costs, and I don't care the size of the order. I don't care if it's a $50 order or a $50,000 order. It gets treated the same way. And we'd spent a lot of time educating our staff that it's not for them to decide whether it's a small order. Nothing infuriates me more when I hear somebody walking around the building and they say, I've got a client who's totally pissed off because something went wrong on the order, and they're making a whole big story because it's only a $400 order. And I go like this, I never want you to talk like that, because a $400 order today with a satisfied client becomes a $40,000 or a $4,000 order tomorrow, or a $40,000 order the next day. Never disrespect an order. Every order counts and should be treated the same way. So to get back to what I was saying, it's all about money. When you're having an error rate like that, it starts to cost you money. Our error rate in Logomark is about 0.5%.
Wow.
Now, I tell you what, I don't think you can get it much lower than that because, and that error is not necessarily product. It's just you're dealing with people and people make mistakes. But I can tell you now, to have a type of error rate like that is like a dream come true for any production facility. And you speak to a lot of people and you speak to a lot of clients, and you look at the error rate that they have and what we have. And yes, there are going to be some clients who say, well, I've had more errors than that with you. Sometimes you just get a client. It's just, I don't know why, and I can't tell you why, but it's always their order that goes wrong. You understand? It's how you fix up that order and how you correct it that brings them back as a client. I'll tell you now, about 2 years ago, we had a large order for, it was about $600,000 worth of product. It was a water bottle. And the, the end user went back and forth changing the artwork, and they changed it 7 times. Now, the, the logo was, you could have used any one of them. They were all confined to what their brand was. You understand? But they were making it slightly smaller, slightly this, slightly that. You know what I mean? Somehow or other, the client gave us the go ahead on the 7th. I don't know what happened, and we're still trying to figure out, but somehow they used artwork number 6. Artwork number 7 was approved, signed off in the factory, but somehow artwork number 6. And it was a very small difference, but it was a difference. Anyway, we delivered the product, and the client called me up and says, Trevor, you won't believe it. You've used the wrong logo. Well, they didn't call me up. They called, my team. And I said, that's not a problem. If it's wrong, we'll fix it up. And he said, you'll do what? I said, if it's wrong and the client won't accept it, if they find that there's so much difference between artwork number 6 and the artwork number 7, we'll fix it up. We'll replace the order. Anyway, they went back to their client and they said to their client, they spoke to me, the owner of the company, and I turned around and said, if they cannot use that product, we understand. It's our error. We take responsibility. We'll redo the product. We just got to bring more product in to do it. The client was so shocked that we would replace an order for $600,000. He called me up with his distributor. He said to me, you prepared to do this? We stand by our product. If it's our mistake, we'll correct it. If it's your mistake, we'll help you. And he says, I respect that. He says, we can use the product. He says, I'm not going to penalize you. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do for you. If the product was going to LA, I said, you know what, I'll get one of my trucks to deliver the product for you. He says, you know what, I appreciate that. And they accepted the product. And the distributor sales have since more than doubled with us because of that. It's what the company is about. And if you come to Logomark, everybody in the company has that type of mentality, right down to the production floor. Everybody, we've still got our first employee in the company.
Unbelievable.
My management team is probably on average 20 years. My middle management team is probably close to that as well. People, they have a hell of a passion about working in this company. And they all care about it, by the way.
By the way, that's an amazing thing. And that's a legacy right there. Obviously having a business that's successful, that's growing, that's amazing. But building a company and a culture that people feel passionate about what they do and love to come to work to every day, that to me is the ultimate thing that you could achieve as an entrepreneur. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'll tell you, Jeremy, don't think it's always been, roses and smiles, and we've made our mistakes, and they've been very, very costly. I tell you, most people could retire on the mistakes I've made in my life. Okay, there've been some very, very expensive mistakes, and one of the biggest lessons I learned in my life in this country was when we launched Logomark in 2000. I think it was 2014. It was a low-cost division of product that people expected the quality to be the same quality as you could buy in Logomark, but at a lower cost. And we went all out and launched a huge catalog. At the time, I invested about $9 million in inventory, which was a lot of money in those days. When we launched it, the product was fantastic. The catalog was amazing. Logomark's catalogs were always one of the best in the cat. Our catalogs used to be a 700-page catalog. It was crazy in those days. Anyway, we launched ValueMark, and it was sometimes you can be successful in life, and that success can destroy you. And that's what happened. It nearly put me out of business. It was so successful that it nearly took me out of business. And I'll tell you what happened. Within a few days, we'd garnished like 2,000 orders in this product. And they weren't small orders, they were big orders, big quantities. And I'd already left. I was in China at the time. I'd left after the launch. And within 2 weeks, this place came to a grinding stop. We had totally miscalculated the response that we'd get to the product line, and we just couldn't deliver. And I got a call in China, and they said, "You better get your ass back here now." I said, "How bad?" They said, "You better get on the next plane back here." Customer service are sitting crying in the cubicles. Factories come to a stop. It's a disaster. I got on the next plane. I got back here the next day, or the same day. When you fly from China, you typically arrive the same day as from China. And I walked into the office, and it was a disaster. I mean, there was just total panic everywhere. We had got so many orders, and we just couldn't deliver. And the goods were just piling up. And when you're late with orders, the distributor doesn't just call one person. They'll call 10 people. Where's my order? Where's my order? They'll call. If you don't get back to them, they'll call somebody else. So you had 10 people running around one order trying to solve it. It was a total disaster. And I just thought, oh my God, this thing's going to be absolute. I really didn't know how to correct it. And I called up one of my distributors, and I asked her to come in and see me. I said, "What the hell do I do? How do I deal with this?" She says to me, "Trevor, I'm going to tell you the way it works in America. You got to come out and just tell them you screwed up. Tell them the truth. People won't be happy, but they'll understand and they'll deal with it." And she helped me write a email that I sent out. And we sent out this email, and in 24 hours, it was like the storm, it just passed. Like going through a hurricane, and everything just settled down. There was this total quietness. People just backed off. And I said to my production guys, we called them all in, I said, "How do we correct this?" I put out a notice to the industry. Please, until we notify you, do not send any more orders to Logomark or ValueMark. We need to clean up and get back on track. And we did exactly that. And the industry actually respected what I did. And no orders were coming in, but we managed to start one production line at a time. There were 5 different production lines. One at a time, we got the goods going. The next one we got going. The next one, until we had all 5 production lines going. I offered to pay all the freight costs. It cost me $2 million in freight. I paid out $2 million in free freight to get it to the clients and end users. We wrote letters to everybody apologizing for what we did. After a month of having done this, we then started getting orders in again and started getting it flowing. Obviously, we lost a lot of money on that, and we lost a lot of credibility. But we never lost the respect of the distributor. And slowly, surely, they came back and started buying from us again and supporting Logomark. And I continue. That was one time in my life where I have to be very thankful to the industry for supporting, what we went through. And we came through that and just grew after that, and and that's how we became a very respected supplier in the industry.
What year was that? The value mark situation.
That was in 2014, I think, if I remember
Wow.
correctly.
So it's been 11 years since there, and you've come and
Oh,
continue to grow and thrive and continue to succeed
it
since that
it
moment.
it hurt. Let me tell you something. That when you do, it's not $2 million just in freight doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you don't have $2 million, you know, it hurts you to find that cash. And then we launched we were so far ahead in 2017, 18. We launched the packaging business before um, digital packaging was even available in the rest of the industry, even in the retail industry. Digital packaging wasn't available. We launched digital packaging because I believed that digital packaging was going to be a way that you can get a better message across to clients. You could to use a QR code. We launched it here in California. We had 200 people fly in for the launch. It was an incredible launch of the product. Unfortunately, the equipment we bought never worked, and we had a lot of problems with the equipment. And it took us nearly 5 years and $12 million later to say, you know what, it just was not right. But we were always ahead of our times with stuff. So we've made our mistakes, Jeremy. Don't kid yourself. We've been a very successful company. Thank God we've been more successful than what we've made errors. But we've had our errors as well. It's not always plain sailing.
But Trevor, let me just tell you from my perspective, because this is the first time I'm hearing your story, and you to me are a true entrepreneur, because there's oftentimes entrepreneurs, and myself included, you go through something and you have a failure. And I think we should speak about the failures more often, because people try to pretend like they don't exist. And frankly, entrepreneurs, in my opinion, have more failures than anyone else, because we're putting ourselves out there so much more than everyone else. Like, it's bound to happen. And you just got to be okay with the failures. But it sounds like you had this big failure that almost broke your business, and you were honest and transparent and kept the trust of people. And then only a few years later, you launch a whole new thing that's the first of its kind with the packaging before the industry kind of caught on. You were okay kind of setting the tone and being out there ahead of everyone else, leading the pack, and being okay because you didn't know how everything was going to work. And as you said, it didn't work from day one. It took many years, $12 million to get right, but you were pushing the boundaries. And I think that's the way you're going to grow in this type of business. You have to be ahead of the curve, and you might fall on your face a couple of times, but be okay with that.
If I could really say as an entrepreneur that every time you launch something, you're going to be successful. And the one thing I'll tell anybody now, I don't care how successful you are in business. I don't care how successful you are in the promo industry. You can go launch another product in the promo industry and it'll be a total disaster. I can't explain to you why, but it just happens that way. It's not, the success comes from how you get over it and move on and reestablish yourself. If everything was going to be a success, then there'd be so much competition out there that you'd never be able to compete with anything. And there's enough competition out there already. There's a lot of successful entrepreneurs. And, like one of my key guys once turned around to me and said, Trevor, do you know how wealthy you would have been had you not made the mistakes you made? I said, if I knew that at the time, I would never have taken the risks that I did to become successful at what I became successful at. You know what I mean? There's the risk factor. And I can tell you now, the one thing I'll tell any entrepreneur out there, listen, I'm not an educated person. I never went to university. I have a high school degree. Um, I I just learned, having lived in South Africa, we went through some really tough times during apartheid, uh, with the way what happened in the country. We went through strikes, riots, um, currency collapsed by 50% in one day, sanctions, you name it. Whatever you're seeing now, the tariffs are like chicken feet compared to what we went through. I'm not joking, Jeremy. I mean, what we went through, if you look at, there was a report, article that came out about a year ago. Who are one of the most successful um, immigrants in this country? And South Africans were right on top there. And not because, we're South Africans, it's because what we went through in business there to survive, how we survived. We had, our prime interest rate was 26%. 26%, and you had to make money on that. That's the type of stuff we do. Inflation was through the roof. You're talking about 16, 17% inflation. You had to trade under those conditions. You know what I mean? And so for us, we've had a lot of experience in that. And the one thing I can tell you today in my business is the one error that most entrepreneurs make that are not successful is that they don't have a right-hand person who can execute on their vision. Because most entrepreneurs cannot execute. I can tell you, I don't care who they are. The most successful businessman in this country, or woman, they only successful because they have really, really good people to execute their vision. And that was the one, besides the errors I made, if I had to say along my trip to becoming a successful businessman, was until I hired the right-hand person who could execute what my vision was. That's when my company turned around. And that happened during COVID. During COVID, I'd lost a lot of money just before COVID with the packaging business. And COVID came along, and within, I think it was in March, within 20 days, our sales had dropped 90%.
Wow.
And I turned around. Clive had just joined me, Clive Goldberg. I said, Clive, we got to go. We got to come out of this thing slinging bats, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We got to come out fighting. I'm not letting 400 people lose their jobs. We got to come out, and we got to come up. He said, what you going to do? I said, I think having because of my facility in China, we could get product far faster than anyone else. They had boots on the ground there,
Mm-hmm.
and you couldn't go to China. And I said, I'll tell you what you do. You worry about the production. You worry about all that stuff. You make sure that you can execute. Let's go raise some money. We were, no money was coming in. I went and raised some money. I went back to my bank. I said, they've got to give me some money. I went and raised some private money that I was going to pay back within 3 months. It was a sick amount of money. And I went and raised this money, and I went and committed to $29 million worth of PPE. People thought I was crazy. And I said to Clive, this is when you either go down or you come out. And within 2 weeks, we were delivering PPE product. Even less. Within 10 days, we were delivering our first. The goods were coming in by FedEx and landing here, and trucks were waiting outside to distribute. From having a total disaster, 2020 at the time became our biggest year ever.
Hmm. It's
We had
amazing.
we had turned the company, that, and Clive. I got to give credit to Clive, because Clive managed the entire back end side of the operation. You know, managed the staff. We kept all our staff. We rotated them on. We had to cut the hours, but we made sure everybody was getting their money, and that they'd have a job to feed their families. And I turned my office. I, I brought in 2 desks into my office. I brought in my buying managers that we have here in the States, and we sat here literally till midnight every night, working with the factories, getting product. And I can tell you now, I didn't even know what was going on in the back end. I had to leave it all to Clive. And he managed the costs, he managed our overheads, he did everything. And that's from then on, this company just turned. We read the industry right in 2021. We were cash flush in 2020. I mean, we had really made a lot of money. I was able to pay back any debt I had. Okay. And we had a lot of goods that were in production. Now, everybody had put a hold on their goods. I said to my people, let's go. Let's bring in product now. Let's start. We've got the cash. Let's do it. Everyone's got no cash because they had no sales. You know what I mean? And those who got into PPE late had some money, but we really, our timing couldn't have been better. And we brought in a ton of merchandise. And the next thing you see, the container rates went up by, $35,000 a container, you know, $35,000 a container. It was crazy. It was just crazy. And 2021 turned out to be another bumper year. And we just went stronger and stronger every year. And that's when I learned, the difference between, not that my other management staff weren't good, but they were good at what they did. Where my weakness was having somebody who could understand me enough and my vision and my risk taking to bring it back and put it into some perspective and manage everything. And I must tell you something, it's been an unbelievable ride in the last 5 years.
Amazing. And so that I want to take it to the future. Where
Mhm.
do you think the next 5 years looks like? In the last 5 years, it seems like you've learned something that's an amazing thing that everybody who's listening could take from that is have a business person to be your right side to help you guide you through the challenges. But frankly, I think a lot of the success, I know you're giving it to your team. A lot of your success comes from you. And that's okay. You're an entrepreneur. You're back against the wall. The whole world's falling apart. Reminding myself how COVID was. It was a very scary, dangerous place. No one knew what the right thing to do is, and you have to make some gambles if you want to win. And a lot of your competitors probably didn't want to win. They wanted to survive, and you wanted to win. So you doubled down and you did the things that others didn't, but it set you guys up for success. And you had the right person beside you to kind of help you put all the pieces in place while you were doing the bigger things. Now, where does the next 5 years in your mind look like? Obviously, there's tariffs, there's AI, there's a lot of changes happening. Where do you see us going? And do you still think there's immense opportunity in this industry?
So before I go there, Jeremy, anyone who ever goes into survival mode is setting up their company for failure. Because once you adopt that a negative attitude, it flows down from the top right down to the person on the production floor. When you become negative, everything around you becomes negative. If I cannot stand negative people. If you're negative around me, just just get out of my sight. I hate negativity. I'd rather look at the good side of people, or I'd rather look at the good potential of what's out there. And in business, when you become negative or you go into survival mode, that means that you're adopting a total negative opportunity of what the situation is. 9 times out of 10, in Argentina, after every recession or whatever's happened, 9/11, you name it, 2008, we've come out better. COVID, we came out better. The positive is that you got to attack, not regress, because there are 90% of the people will go into that survival mode that you just said. When you go into survival mode, it's a sign of weakness. And when we go into attack mode, people want to deal with people that are positive and strong about where this industry is going. The industry's been around for, I think, 100, 200 years now. You know, every economy has its ups and downs. It goes back to the Bible when you had 7 good years and you had 7 lean years. If you don't expect every year to be a good year, don't expect every year to be a lean year. You know what I mean? And if you're strong enough and you've made sure your company's in a strong position in the good years, it's time to capitalize in the lean years and take advantage of those companies that are showing weakness by going to a survival mode. We've increased our inventory. Right now, I can tell you now, there are a lot of people that don't have inventory in our industry. We increased our inventory. Okay. And with tariffs, that's a very, very difficult thing to do, because if you as a supplier have, call it $30 million worth of inventory on hand, okay, all of a sudden you got to find $10 million to finance that your current inventory to have the same amount of units to have the same amount. You got to find $10 million to have the same amount of units that you had 6 months ago. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. Yep.
Most companies don't have that type of cash lying around. No, in fact, 99% of companies don't have that type of cash lying around. So you have to look at it differently. You got to say, well, obviously there's price increases. What are the price increases going to have effect on your sales? How much are they going to account for your growth? And then how much do you have where you can take advantage of the weakness of your competitors, where they don't have inventory and you do, and you go buy inventory to make it happen. Now, I can tell you now, when the tariffs hit in February, I spoke to a guy who's a billionaire, and I said to him, what would you do? Would you adjust your prices now, or do you wait? He says to me, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to adjust my prices. He said, now I'll talk to you. He said, because if you told me differently, I wouldn't have spoken to you. He says, because that's the right move. You're able to lever what you have in inventory and offset the increases to balance out so that the painful increase is steady and not going up like crazy. And we increase our prices, and some large distributors said to me, you're bold. I said, you'll see in 6 months' time who was right, who was wrong in the suppliers. And because we did that, we were able to offset a lot of the expenses. We took advantage of our existing inventory, balanced out the increase in costs, and increased our inventory levels. I was at a show in Chicago where I saw you, and one very large distributor came up to me and said to me, oh, Trevor, we thought you were crazy when you did it, but you were right, because now we're seeing where you went up by a percentage of between 10 and 13%, we're seeing increases coming through at 40, 60, 70%, which is a shock to our clients. People adjust. And this is what we learned in South Africa. In South Africa, we lived with inflation. We lived with so much that would freak people out in this country. You know what I mean? Trading conditions that were horrendous. You understand? At the end of the day, it's how you deal with that situation to keep moving forward in your situation. Making sure that you can still supply the product, making sure that you keep your business very even keeled along the way, you understand, and that you can deal with these issues when you have the deep inventory that you're dealing with. That yes, of course, we will have more increases as we go through our inventory, but they're not going to be so large that it scares people off. And the one thing that we learned in South Africa was people adjust. The country adjusts. If you look at what you're paying for airfares now versus airfares a year ago, 2 years ago, hotel rooms. I was in Chicago now, hotel rooms were running for a Hampton Inn at $600 at the ASI show.
It's crazy.
I mean, where have you ever seen that? You know what I mean? But people paid it. They adjusted. People go to the grocery store. They see the new grocery price. They adjust. Go to a restaurant. You used to pay $55 for a fancy restaurant for a steak. Now you're paying $75, $95 for a steak. People, it takes time. And as we go through the cycle of a 6-month cycle, people adjust and they come back and they start to buy again. And all that happens in our industry, if you want to know what's going to happen in the next 5 years, is what happens now when people get into this, not panic mode, but, watching their budget, is they still do promotions, Jeremy. Where they had the confidence to go order 500 units and have them lie in the storeroom and use them, now they use, and they'd order 500 units at one time. Now they're ordering 100 units 5 times. They're still going to use 500 units to do their promotions. They got to keep their businesses going. So I believe that we're still going to see a little bit of negativity, from the end users in the next month or two. But that 6-month cycle will come through, and then it becomes the same for everybody. Because the same client that you're selling to, they've done the same thing in their business. Their prices have increased like crazy. You understand? And people have adjusted. And so everything gets back to normal until there's some crazy thing happens again. So I believe that in the next 5 years, I think once it adjusts, what's going to happen to the industry. Now, if you look at the industry, go back to 2012, 2014, this was a $13 billion industry. It went to a $26 billion industry. It didn't go to $26 billion just because people spent more money. People paid higher prices for product, what they were buying. If you look during COVID, they weren't buying plastic pens, Jeremy. You know yourself, you weren't selling plastic pens. You were selling beautiful boxed items that you were shipping to people's homes, and they were paying $80, $90 for a gift to send to somebody's house. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the same thing is going to happen in our industry in the next, probably start later this year, early to next year. Well, once they adjust, they're going to start buying their 500 quantity again. The only difference is they're going to be paying probably 30% more to 35, 40% more, whatever the tariffs are, and it's all adjusted. The only difference is your units will start to come back up again, but your sales, just by the increase of your cost of the tariffs, will adjust to where you will have maybe a 20% growth. You understand? Or 17% growth on those tariffs, and the rest will be then organic, where you start to add other product or whatever comes to it. So I'm very bullish on the industry moving forward.
Well, I love to hear that, Trevor. I love the optimism. I share that same optimism. And I just want to say it was awesome hearing your story. And it was great to meet you a couple of weeks ago. I'm glad we were able to make this work. Thank you so much for being on the pod.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you saw a different perspective
No, I did.
to what you probably interview most, others. I'm a very open book, and
I love it. I love it.
you could ask me anything, and I'm there's nothing to hide. I'll share my errors and my mistakes with you. And I want to thank you. It's been fantastic talking to you this morning, and I haven't spoken about this to anybody. Where I haven't, someone's never said to me, like, you know, how did you get through all this stuff? And they just think, you have this beautiful business, but they don't really understand what you went through to get to this stage. And you went through the same thing when you built your business and sold your business. You know what I'm talking about.
I do, and it's awesome. I love reminiscing, and I figure talking to people like you who are successful, and I know that success comes with ups and downs. It's a very important thing for other people who are just maybe starting out in their journey to realize it's not a straight line up. There are a lot of zigs and zags, and that's okay. And so I think our audience is going to get a lot out of this episode. So I really appreciate you taking the
Well,
time.
I just hope they don't go into survival mode and stay positive and don't get negative. The industry is strong. It's a great, great platform for end users to get their marketing message across. And it's still one of the best mediums to use, and don't give up on it.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor.